Welcome to the Knack for Business podcast. Get more details and opportunities from our website, knackforbusiness.com.
From an audience perspective, why do your sales conversations feel like they're going nowhere? And even when you know you have a great product? That's exactly what Paul will talk about. How asking the right questions creates emotional connection, builds instant trust, and leads to more confident sales conversations. Our guest today is Paul Kirch from the Boss Academy. Paul is the driving force behind the Academy, a thriving platform created to empower entrepreneurs with business ownership success strategies. A top-performing sales leader turned founder and podcast host, Paul built Boss Academy Radio into a top 10 business podcast, using it as a springboard to launch a full-scale entrepreneurial accelerator. As a seasoned sales coach, Paul believes every buying decision is emotional, and through his signature Askology Method, he helps leaders connect deeply with their audience to boost trust and drive results. He's also the founder of Winning Press Release and CEO of Paul Kirch Consulting, guiding clients to align their messaging with what really moves people. With a background that includes 10 years at Gallup, numerous leadership awards, and a lifetime of mentoring and volunteerism, Paul brings experience, insight, and heart to every venture he leads. He also hosted a top 10 business podcast, Boss Academy. Paul, absolute pleasure seeing you again, and welcome to the Knack for Business podcast. Do you have a favorite quote or saying, sir?
Man, I've got a few. One that I think comes up a lot is there's a great line from Jerry Maguire. It's not show friends, it's show business. And even though we're going to talk about emotionally connecting with people, the importance of it, if you're a business owner, a business leader, a salesperson, you need to find ways of driving your business forward. Sometimes we get so bogged down by the wrong message. So I love that idea of it's not show friends, it's show business. We can be friends, but let's focus on the business.
Start me with Boss Academy. I just love the name. Tell me a story.
Yeah, so in 2014, I had a unique opportunity. I was at a networking event hosted by a fairly large internet-based company that does hosting and support. They were hosting summits around the country, and I got invited. I almost didn't go, but I went. During the Q&A, the speaker had kind of talked over the head of a lot of the audience members. There was a lot of small business owners in there, and she was brilliant, but she didn't know how to speak to her audience. And so during the Q&A, I actually was able to help a couple of people that had asked questions, provide some clarification. Next thing you know, it was really odd, but people in the audience started asking me questions. And the speaker was gracious and she said, "Oh, we love this. This is what we do." And she turned it over to me. And afterwards, people are coming up handing me business cards. It was very flattering. This woman approached me, who was the general manager of a radio station over in Dallas. And she said, "Would you ever consider coming on one of our local shows as a guest?" I loved what you had to say. I said, "I'd love it." So I give her my card. A week later, she calls me. She says, "Listen, we actually have a new program, and I've got a drive time show on Monday that I'd love to have you host instead of just having you on as a guest." At the time, I was like, wow, this is great. I mean, I've actually wanted to start a show. And I said, "I've got this idea for this concept called Boss Academy." And Boss stood for Business Ownership Success Strategies. I thought it would be a great show to help give business owners and entrepreneurs some strategies for success. And that's what the foundation of the show was. So I kind of fell into it. It may not have ever happened on its own, but that chance meeting ended up giving me a live radio show that I hosted for over a year before deciding to move to podcasting. My clients weren't really in the Dallas area. They were on the coast, New York, California, places. I thought podcasting had a better chance. And that's how Boss Academy actually began, as a radio show, later a top 10 podcast. And today it's an online mastermind community. So thank you, Wade.
Asking questions is a key critical component for sales and pitching. So why?
I always think back to what we consider primal triggers. There's a lot of things that are primal triggers, those things that trigger us emotionally. Sometimes we don't even know why we respond to them. Storytelling is a great primal trigger. It's like, before there was newspapers, how did you share information? Through stories. But another one, a critical piece, is asking questions. If you're in a conference room and everybody's not paying attention to the speaker, and all of a sudden the speaker asks a question, everybody stops and perks up. Questions capture attention. They allow us to get the other person talking and get them engaged. And they allow us to uncover information, or maybe even tap into information we already know that they're going to say, but allows us to speak about our products in a way that allows us to serve them better. So questions, they just are a powerful way of capturing attention.
I think I could guess, but why don't you tell me about Askology?
Yeah, so I'll share a quick story as much as I can make it quick. But years ago, I had an amazing sales leader that I worked with. He was a mentor, a great guide. And I got into sales thinking I like to talk. I can talk my way into situations, right? But I learned that if I asked really powerful questions, that I could get the other person talking, get them engaged. The more they talked, the more they liked me, which was an odd thing. I thought, well, gosh, that's the opposite of how I think it should work, but that's exactly how it worked. So I had this opportunity with this company in California, in LA, that was massive. And I was working in the market research industry at the time. This was a multi-million-dollar opportunity. And I knew that if I could uncover where they were doing some of their project work, we would have a chance of coming up with a strategy and a plan to take some of that work away. The woman I was working with was tough. She never gave up anything, but I knew that if I could get in front of her and ask her the right questions, it would work. I was with my manager at the time. He came out to visit me and we were going on this trip together. Got in that meeting and I learned two powerful lessons that day, Wayne. Not only did I learn the power of questions, but also there was another valuable lesson. The opportunity came up to ask her the questions that I had planned, and it went exactly as I'd hoped, probably even better than I hoped. And afterwards, I'm in the parking lot talking to my boss, and I said, what a great meeting. He goes, let me ask you a question. When you had the opportunity to ask her that question and uncover where she's doing that work, what'd she say? I said, that's the one thing that's interesting. I asked her that question and she didn't really answer it, but we still got some good information. He goes, no, let me stop you. He goes, she answered it, but you were too busy thinking about the next thing you were going to say, and you didn't bother even listening to what she said. And in that moment, Wayne, I realized not only are questions one of the most powerful things that we can leverage as a salesperson, but that active listening, right? And over the years, I really put those two lessons to use throughout my sales career. And I started to figure out, okay, are there certain types of questions that are more valuable than others? Obviously, we want to ask open-ended questions as much as possible. Closed-ended questions can be trap questions. It doesn't mean you don't ever ask yes/no questions, but if you ask the wrong yes/no question, like if you say, hey, are you happy with your current supplier? And they say yes, well, where do you go from there? You've kind of lost them and they're actually tuning out from you. So I started to narrow it down to 4 different question types, which I can share that now. I'll just go ahead and tell you what the 4 question types are. The question types are leading questions, are those questions that we might already know what they're going to say. We ask them a question that's kind of strategic. They're probably going to say this. And if they say this, this is how I'm going to respond. Then there's investigative questions. Investigative questions are the ones that we want to know the answer to. And with that information, now we can actually talk about how we can help serve them. Every buying decision takes place at an emotional level, which I personally believe it does. Often our clients are dealing with stress, they're dealing with pressure, they're dealing with frustrations. So empathy questions can allow us to tap into what are those things that they're going through that allow us to connect with them at a personal level. Maybe it's not even a personal level, maybe it's just a professional level, but it's something that's holding them back. A 4th type is the question type that I probably tell people to use caution with the most. You have to be careful, but an instigating question might be, I can't believe your current supplier botched that job and put you in that situation. What did that do to the team morale? Now you're touching on something maybe a little sensitive subject, but allows you to connect with them in a way that they're going, okay, he not only understands our frustration, what we're going through, he also understands why it matters, and maybe he has a solution to help us. So those are the 4 question types. And over the years, I've just learned that those 4 question types allow you to engage and drive powerful conversations.
Yeah, it's interesting. When you describe the 4 types, the immediate thing I started thinking about is negotiation, the art of negotiation, or gathering information. I've seen different people speak to this. You see it on Instagram, pick the agency that you like and you're off, and they'll do this as a lead-in. And it almost seems like you have to have that flow. You have to understand where things are going. How much research do you have to do prior to your interview with the client?
Yeah, great question. It depends on the situation. I'll be honest with you. It's just maybe something that's naturally ingrained in me. I'm a curious person by nature. So I've become really good at asking questions, not because I'm trying to do something manipulative or strategic, but I just really want to get to know the other person, know what they're going through. I don't always have to do a lot of research because I'm good at asking questions on the fly. But I think if you're just learning to become better at asking questions, it's always important to know who you're talking to, what they're going through. And you mentioned negotiation. One of the philosophies, I'm sure you've heard it. I grew up thinking that was true, was the first person who speaks in negotiation loses. Well, that's absolutely not true. In fact, really good negotiators are often the ones that lead the charge. If you are driving the conversation and controlling the conversation, asking them powerful questions can allow you to really control the conversation, take it where you want it to go. You want to work towards a win-win scenario with negotiation, but you definitely don't want to be on the losing end. So finding ways to keep them engaged and keep them feeling like you're driving towards a win-win scenario is powerful. I don't always do a lot of research with every conversation because sometimes you don't have that opportunity, but it's always better to be armed with more information than less. But if you get good at asking questions, you can actually walk into a scenario not knowing anything and walk out with a lot of information because you just found a way of uncovering some information.
And you're paying attention to the cues.
Yeah. Active listening.
Bernie brought it up, and you mentioned it earlier. Tell me about these cues. Well, what are pin drops so we can go, oh, that's a cue?
That's a great question. To say that it's based off of some cues that you're listening for makes it sound like it's something artificial and you're forcing it. Wayne, I treat it like this. If you want to get good at getting to know people, uncovering what makes them tick, find ways of talking about your brand, get good at conversations. And conversations are not just about talking and telling. They're about inquiring and getting to know them. And if you're good at conversing, then you don't have to worry about cues. You just worry about, okay, am I really connecting with this person? My goal when I'm with a client, and we've all been there. Have you ever been talking to somebody that they just don't seem to want to engage? They don't want to say anything. You're talking about your brand. You're talking about those features and benefits. You're telling them how great your stuff are, and they just kind of sit there. Well, if you ask questions and they don't respond, maybe they're disengaged or maybe you're asking the wrong questions. But if you ask questions, most likely they're going to respond. It's kind of like the idea of creating a little bit of momentum. When I coach salespeople, I talk about 5-minute jump starts. You can do anything for 5 minutes. You want to get up and start cold calling first thing. That first call you make is hard. But once you've done it for a couple of minutes, it's easier to create that momentum. And I think it's true with conversations with difficult clients. You get them talking a little bit, then all of a sudden they're going to open up. I've had situations with somebody who seems so dismissive and so disinterested. By the end of the call, we're like buddies. It's because you get them engaged and talking.
Something I call a campfire moment. Tell me about storytelling, and when do you check in on the story to see where they are?
It's a great point about storytelling. Years ago, I had an uncle that I always thought he was one of the most interesting people. He always walked into a room and seemed to make friends so easily. He never forgot a name. I talked about that sales manager that was a great mentor. He always said, "Oh, notice everything." To this day, if I see somebody wearing a name tag, I refer to them by their name as much as I can. Good storytelling, whether you think stories are made up of 7, 8, or 10 different elements, you got your characters, you got setting, you got the plot, the conflict, the theme. But in the end, to be a good storyteller, you need to find ways of creating a story that actually has some sort of, whether it's a conflict or not, some sort of moment of excitement, moment of opportunity, moment of learning. A good story often does have conflict, and then there's a resolution. Oh, there was this problem with this client, and we found a solution to make sure that never could happen again. Storytelling is about trying to drive engagement. If you're not a good storyteller, become one. I used to listen to myself on recordings. I would record myself on sales calls. windows up in my car, driving down the road in San Francisco, pulling up to a stoplight. Somebody next door to me, they can't hear anything. But in my mind, I'm like, oh, it's so embarrassing. Oh my God, these people know what I'm doing. They know I'm listening to myself. But over time, you start to, am I asking good questions? Am I telling stories that engage, or am I boring them to tears? The best way to get better at anything is to record yourself, listen to it, and say, okay, I need to work on this. And I think storytelling is not a perfect science, but anybody can become a better storyteller. And if you're somebody that is talking to people, I love this example. One of my members of Boss Academy, and he's also one of our sponsors, he's a body language expert, also a market researcher, but he taught us some training on body language. When I first met him, I was going through this situation where I guess, Wayne, I was starting to feel like really insecure on a lot of conversations. I'd be talking to somebody, I'd see them tilt their head to the side. Sometimes they didn't have a smile on their face. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm boring this person to tears. I get really self-conscious about it. I was talking to David about this. He says, no, Paul, he goes, that's what you want. He says, when they tilt their head to the side and put a smile on, that's when you know you've got their attention. It changed everything. So when I'm talking to somebody and I see the head tilt to the side, I know that I'm really engaging with this person. Little things like that make a huge difference. And they put you in a place where you feel much more confident and want to do more of it.
You ever put mood music in with the story? You do any ambiance moments, or you stage it, or practice doing improv?
I did improv comedy for about 3 years. I was on a traveling team stationed out of a comedy club here in Fort Worth. Improv taught me a lot. The yes and philosophy is so great because it happens so much in companies. Somebody throws out an idea, oh, we can't do that. That's never going to work. Oh, we can't spend the money on that. Whereas yes and in the improv world is the idea that somebody says, hey, what if we created this new report? Hey, that's a great idea. And what if we did this? Everyone feels like they're a part of something. So improv taught me a lot. But no, I'm not somebody who's ever staged anything. I am more organic. Do I prepare? Sure. Do I build presentations sometimes where I put a lot of thought into it? Absolutely. But if I'm talking to somebody and I'm telling a story, hopefully it's something that flows organically, because that's the natural connection. If it's forced, then people disconnect and they feel like you're artificial or untrustworthy. I think organic is real.
You ever do stage acting?
Well, I went in high school. Never did that, but I did do quite a few improv comedy shows, which I guess is kind of similar to stage acting without a script.
You work with Askology to develop team dynamics?
Askology is a great tool in a team setting. I have several exercises that are designed to be interactive for teams. I'm a fan of role-playing and sales training and coaching because it's the closest you can get to a real-life setting without being in a real-life setting. Within Askology, there are several modules that are best used in a group setting. They can be done as solos, but they're really powerful when you get other people involved, play off of each other and learn from each other.
I did remember doing a role-playing one time inside a hospital setting, and it was management training. Nurse manager, and I had to play the role of a staff member who was resistant. I guess I got into it a little too good because she was responding to me as if I was her employee. And all of a sudden I'm looking, I'm like, I had to go, whoa, this is make believe, slow down. But you could see the engines ramping up, and I must have hit a trigger button. So I guess the key here is pay attention if you're hitting the wrong trigger buttons, the wrong emotion. That's not a selling emotion. I was selling something. It wasn't what I wanted to sell.
I had a similar situation happen. I was working with this company out of Nashville, and I used to go there on a monthly basis and train their team. I was hired as a virtual sales manager. I'd come in and work with the team, and we did a lot of role playing. And one time there was this young lady who was fairly new to the company, and I put her in a real situation, something that had happened. The person paired up with her, put her in a bad spot. He was kind of aggressive and not very nice, and he was playing hard, and she really got upset. And afterwards she goes, that was unfair to do that to me. And she was upset. About a month later, she ran into a very similar real life situation where she had a client that was harsh to her. And she came back and told us on the meeting, she goes, I would have never been ready for that had it not been being put in that spot. She goes, I was embarrassed the way I acted the day that I was in that role playing. She goes, that was a situation that could easily happen to anybody. And I just went through it. So it's really interesting. Sometimes you do kind of get lost in the role. You taking on that hard character, but those things happen. Sometimes that's real life.
There's all kinds of myths out there if you've been around a while. Like, no business ever would need a computer. You only need 5 computers in the world. But what would you like to see entrepreneurs unlearn? That if it was true once, ain't true now?
Well, I would say, Wayne, that this reliance upon features and benefits selling on its own is a challenge for most people to get in those situations because you're going to lose the other person. You're not going to connect with them. If all you're doing, it's easy to talk about features and benefits because we fall in love with our products. Within a company, we're talking about, oh, we just created this new widget and it has all these features. It's so cool. But that's not what people are ultimately buying. The guy you're talking to, the gal you're talking to, maybe they're dealing with, oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to keep the doors open. I don't know how I'm going to make payroll. Wow, it's like this sure we're facing from our vendors. They're dealing with stress and emotional issues, and you're talking about widgets, talking about features and benefits. On its own can cause you to lose a lot of credibility, and then you're going to go, well, gosh, nobody's buying, nobody's seems to be buying our stuff. Well, is it that nobody's buying, or is it that your message is missing the mark and you're not connecting with them where they need to be connected at? So I think that just relying on features and benefits alone is something that I'd like to see people become less tied to. Yeah, of course, you need to talk about what your company does and the products you have, but it should be solving a problem that they have.
Something that you can help me with, Paul, it's sort of 2 bookends. You don't want arrogance, and you certainly don't want pomposity, but you do like confidence. And we've seen both ditches. How do you guide them through a healthy self-confidence that doesn't flow or lead into arrogance?
Well, that's once again where role playing comes into play. When you interview people, I'd say interview them with a heart and a mind of, I could see myself working with this person. I could see myself buying from this person. Because there are some personality traits that they're probably never going to break. If the guy comes across as pompous when you're putting him in a sales scenario and a role play, maybe even during the interview process, you need to think about that. Is that something I'm going to have him out in the marketplace speaking to people in a way that he's going to be alienating? But constantly developing and training your team is critical. I think so many sales leaders out there do a horrible job with that. They have weekly sales meetings, but the weekly sales meetings are going over the projects that are coming in, the numbers that they've got. Those are important things, but where's the development taking place? How are you helping people grow?
You kind of hit on something. We talked about someone who's pompous and the salesperson. Do you find that in certain industries, you have to have a certain air about you? Whether, and not necessarily being pompous, but you can see high-end shops. Like if you're going to a high-end dealership, where the motor vehicles could be, I was going to say 100,000, but now you buy a half ton for that much, where the price point is 500,000 and up. And there's almost like an aloofness. You have to kind of pair yourself up to the circumstance at the time. Because, it's not necessarily being authentic, because that may not be you, the true you. But you also have to realize that who you're going to engage has an expectation. Is there a bit of pairing up so that you're in harmony with where they're at, or what's the scoop?
I think that's a really interesting question. If you've ever dealt with a surgeon or somebody at that level.
I was getting close to those that are.
Yeah, there's definitely, I used to work for a company that the board of directors was almost entirely made up of very arrogant medical doctors and surgeons, and they were difficult to work with. Think about the movie Pretty Woman. Pretty Woman's a great example. She walks into a store and she's treated like garbage because the woman doesn't think she has enough money to shop there. A lot of times that training takes place at the top and it trickles down. You see your boss acting that way towards customers, you emulate it. Or you hire people that have a similar tone. I think nice guys finish last. I don't agree. I think smart people that know how to engage, that are nice, are going to do well in any industry. Yeah, you have to be able to fit in. You're talking to somebody that is worth billions of dollars. You need to be able to relate to them at their level. But that doesn't mean you treat everyone else like garbage. You have to be able to connect and talk to. I've always said I'm a chameleon. I can talk to anybody. I can connect with anybody. If you put me in the setting with somebody who's worth billions of dollars, I'm going to be able to have a conversation with them. Now, are they going to say, well, Paul's a billionaire? No. But most of the salespeople they would be working with wouldn't be either. Well, the guy who comes in that's now worth $1 million is going to get treated well because I'm going to find a way of connecting with him. So I think that's a missed opportunity when it comes to leadership and training. Just because you're selling a high-end product or you're dealing with high-end customers doesn't mean you need to have somebody that is going to be equally arrogant, equally pompous. You need somebody who's strong, who knows how to deal with it, because they're going to have thick skin. If I'm working in a shop that's selling a high-end product to a high-end customer, and I see people in there treating customers like they're dirt because they don't think they have enough money. Las Vegas in the United States is a perfect example. You go to any shop in Las Vegas, and they never make assumptions at who has money. The guy coming in with torn jeans and flip-flops might be worth millions of dollars, and the person who's dressed to the nines might be the one who's struggling to get enough money out of his ATM to play a round of blackjack that night. They don't make assumptions on who they're selling to. Everyone gets treated pretty nicely in Las Vegas in the shops because of that.
Everyone, if you collect high-end watches, there's a company out there that's counterfeiting that watch. One saying that I both am driven toward and pushed away from is heart-centered leadership. I know what they're striving for, but I can't help not knowing enough about them to believe them. Help me with heart-centered leadership.
I'm not sure what you mean 100% by heart-centered leadership. Give me a little deeper definition on what you're referring to.
One thing, and this is the good news, when we got on the internet, everything was about that sale. It didn't require people. It didn't require opinions. It didn't require anything but a code. So artisans are one example. Coaches are another example where they're trying to sell something with heart. And they talk about heart-centered leadership. I want to believe them, but sometimes I feel that I'm in the middle of a bad Sunday morning sermon.
Yeah, well, this is why, once again, we come back to Askology. In those situations, if you're talking to somebody that's a coach and they're trying to tell you why you should hire them versus understanding why you have a need to hire them in the first place, that's two different conversations. If you feel uncomfortable with somebody and you feel like you can't trust them, chances are you should probably follow your gut. There's a lot of people out there that mean well. They care. They're purpose-driven. But they've been taught the wrong way, Wayne, and they're sending a message that does alienate. It doesn't draw you closer to them. It doesn't make you trust them. If I get off the phone with you and feel like, that Wayne guy, I don't know if I can trust him, I'm probably not going to do business with you. And if I do, I'm going to feel uncomfortable until you prove me wrong. Whereas if you and I get off the phone and I feel like Wayne asked me some really good questions, got me talking, and now I engaged with him. Wow, I really trust Wayne. Wayne seemed to really know my business. Now, when I do business with you, I'm going to feel good about that situation until you prove me wrong, and hopefully you never will. But I don't think that we should just bow down to every sales message because they have something really good to say. It better be something that matters to me.
In my journey of visiting different groups and Boss Academy being one of them, I come across some individuals, and one of your primary supporters, Brian Gregory, right? He says, what type of persona are you? What type of business are you? And he has a whole platform in there. It's called Amenity. And it's everything about the message, the color, and all that stuff. So does that fold into the story of when you're doing a pitch? Does that fold into it's a high-end dealership or you're selling Twinkies. Two different spectrums, right? But you still got to sell something. You still making a transaction. One, you hope there's a large volume, and the other, actually, you probably hope for a large volume on either end of the spectrum. But one car, maybe a quarter versus a couple 100,000 Twinkies in a quarter.
Yeah.
Does that matter?
It
That
does,
help?
100%. Brian has changed the way that I look at business. You mentioned Brian Gregory of Admanity. He has this 5-minute assessment called the Yes Test. Actually, he's one of our sponsors through Boss Academy. Wayne and Bernie, I can give you guys that link if you'd like to give it out to your listeners. But if you go out to manatee.com/Boss Academy, you can take the Yes Test. It's a 5-minute test, and it'll tell you what your brand archetype is. And within that information, it's going to tell you what are some of the things I need to be doing and saying to emotionally connect with my buyers. I'm a copywriter, and I will tell you, I use the Admanity products all the time. I've got a deep relationship with Brian. We've become very good friends. He's supported Boss Academy since it became a community. But the one thing I've learned from him is that it does matter. If you're an authority brand selling to a prestige brand, your message is different than what the prestige brand wants to hear. If you're, like you said, Wayne, a high-end watch seller, and I come in and I'm trying to connect with you like I'm the know-it-all, I'm the authority on watches, well, that's going to disconnect because you're going to want to be spoken to in a different way. It does matter. I think it's important that if we're marketing or coming up with sales messaging, we need to know who our audience is so that our message resonates. Coming back to Askology, though, Askology allows you to connect with anybody without knowing who they are because you're asking questions, you're uncovering. Oh, so you sell AP watches. Okay, so tell me a little bit about the makeup of an AP watch. And so they start telling you about the AP watch. Well, why does that matter to your buyers? And now all of a sudden they start talking about it. They're passionate about it. I'm going to learn something, but then I'm like going to be all of a sudden now I've got a message that I can connect with them on. It's like, okay, I understand that. So you've got these AP watches that people are buying because they're a prestige brand. One of the issues you're facing is that people buy them and they never wear them. They put them in a vault because they're too expensive. What if I could show you a way of protecting those watches? We've got this film that can cover the watch and protect it almost like a wrap on a car. Would that be something you'd be interested in? I'm just throwing out as an example. Now all of a sudden you're connecting with them, but it only happened because you asked questions and got to know them. You don't have to be an expert in their business to provide expertise.
Being of a certain age and watching old reruns, you'll wonder where the yellow went when you brush your teeth with Pepsi. You have a business called Winning Press Releases. Tell me how a press release has changed in the last 40.
Yeah, winningpressrelease.com is my brand where we not only author your press release, but we distribute it. I've got a network of about 450 high authority websites. Traditional press releases still exist where you're trying to get in front of an editor at a desk who's doing news shows. But that's harder and harder unless you've got a really newsworthy product or story. You're going to have a hard time getting an editor at CNN to pick up your story. With the winningpressrelease.com, where we will actually send out your press release using an SEO strategy where we take your keywords, we embed it in the title, throughout the story, and then we can get you on page 1 of Google because the search engines love press releases. Press releases, they'll stay sometimes forever, but most press releases stay at least for a year. So you're getting your brand and message out there, and when people search for you, they'll say that they search for Bernie Frensgoat, and they are looking up something related to your show, and you've done a press release on it. Now, all of a sudden, that press release is showing up on page 1 of search or showing up high on the searches. So your brand is always getting exposure. So that's why we do it, and it works well. I started doing it because I have a digital marketing agency that I've run since 2014 called Selliance. And one thing we noticed that SEO is changing. It's harder and harder to make SEO work. It's an expensive practice to do it right. But the press releases are a little bit of a jumpstart and give you a lot of exposure.
Wow, I didn't realize that SEO is becoming more of an arm wrestling as opposed to this is easy.
It's harder today to get SEO to work. Local SEO works better than national SEO, and Google My Business exposed a lot of people to doing local SEO, and So local SEO is still easier to rank, but getting exposure on a national level is expensive and it takes time. Most people give up. We're talking about anywhere from 90 days to 6 months of doing an SEO campaign before you see any results. And most people don't want to spend that money unless they're a larger brand.
I always like to have my listeners have one takeaway they can action on. What's a small change a business owner can make today that's going to give them more selling impact?
Well, I'm going to give you guys, I think I already sent it to you, Bernie, a copy of my Askology ebook. It's a simple 4 or 5 page read that will give you a great jump start. It'll go over those 4 question types. Just get in the habit of asking better questions and drive engagement. You mentioned the word pitch several times, Bernie, and I don't want to make that sound like a negative, but often we associate pitches with telling. And Jeffrey Gitomer, who wrote the Little Bit Red Book of Selling, the Sales Bible, he always said people hate to be sold, but they love to buy. I have always said that if you're telling, you're selling, and no one wants to be sold. It's the same idea. That's why questions are important. So that's where I would say to start, Wayne.
Now, we are on the internet, which means anyone with a browser could be listening. If you have either an ideal client or a geography, who are they and how they reach you?
Well, my client base has always been, since I started my company in 2009, been small to mid-sized business owners. Now, if you want to get technical, when you say mid-size, you're talking $50 million plus. I'm actually not interested in working with companies of that size because they've got layers, they've got resources. Most of my clients are in that $20 million and under range, even down to solopreneurs, and that's who I enjoy working with. I work with people all over the world. My primary clients are in North America, but I've got clients in Europe as well. Australia.
What, the kangaroos giving you a hard time or what?
Let's just say I've got a contact in Australia, and we talk maybe once every 6 months because it's the only way we can find a time that works for. I would encourage you to go to paulkirch.com or bossacademy.com, and I'm out on LinkedIn. Those are 3 areas to find me and connect with me.
And I want to say thank you to Paul Kirch, Wayne Pratt, my co-host, you, the Knack for Business listeners, because you know what? Without you, what's the point, right? Wayne and I become more edified, but you also get more information. Paul helps owners and entrepreneurs turn awkward sales conversations into finding that emotional trigger that helps the sale. At the same time, it's not selling, but telling a story so you can sell your product in the process. The person buying will want it and knows they want it, not because you're fluffing them.
To reach the podcast hosts, email them at info@creativeinsight.com or by the website creativeinsight.com, spelled KREATIVINSIGHT.com. To reach Wayne at his email, wayne@motive8u.ca, or his website, motive8u.ca. If you would like to be a guest on this podcast and share your knowledge, let us know. We would also appreciate your feedback on the content or format. Check the show notes for more details. For these podcasts, we like to acknowledge the support and thanks to the following people: Carl Richards from Podcast Solutions Made Simple, Fred Crouch, the Property Wizard podcaster, where Bernie is a co-host, Jovan Strika from At Hive, a co-working space that is more than just a space, then Melanie Weber, Bernie's invaluable business partner, and Wayne Pratt from Motivate You Inc., who serves as both a coach and co-host of these podcasts. Disclaimer: please note that the Knack for Business podcast episodes are meant solely for educational and general informational purposes. The information and opinions contained within are not intended to be professional advice on any subject matter. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed by the participants are their own personal beliefs and do not represent the views of the podcast hosts or any affiliated organizations. It is important to note that this podcast is not a replacement for consulting with certified experts in your area who possess knowledge of your unique situation. The hosts of the podcast, along with any participants or affiliated groups, do not take responsibility for any actions taken or not taken based on the information presented in this episode. It is highly recommended that individuals seek guidance from their own personal advisors in fields such as accounting, law, or other pertinent areas prior to undertaking any actions or making decisions that may impact their financial, legal, or other aspects of life.